They shouldn't know what they knew. In July 1954, a man passed through Tokyo's Haneda Airport with a valid passport from a country that does not exist. Toward, it read, complete with stamps from past travels, a custom seal, and a company ID badge. He spoke fluent French, Japanese, and Catalan. Customs officials detained him. 12 hours later, he vanished from a locked room under 24-hour surveillance. The passport disappeared with him. Airport records were erased. Guards were reassigned. No trace has ever surfaced. And yet, that's only the first. Since 1897, a series of encounters, 10 to be exact, suggest that these are not isolated incidents, but signs of something larger. A pattern. The reports share one impossible trait. Each subject held knowledge they should not possess. Passport from nowhere. Erased without exit. They erased it. We found the file. If time travel were real, it would not be announced. It would be classified, suppressed, erased, one file at a time. Across 128 years, 10 cases have quietly resisted deletion. They appear in sworn police testimonies, obscure scientific footnotes, and in the whispers of agencies that no longer officially exist. Each case involves a subject who either appeared without warning or vanished under surveillance. They spoke about future events with surgical accuracy. Some described technology decades before its invention. Others referenced historical anomalies, never published outside secure channels. There's no single fingerprint, no shared accent or background. But all 10 share a chilling consistency. They break time, and they pay for it. The pattern isn't just in what they said. It's in what happened next. Raided apartments, burned notebooks, NDAs signed under threat of prosecution. These are not legends. These are documented anomalies that someone wants gone. Why now? Because in April 2024, Japan's Ministry of Transport was forced to release the full internal report on the Toward incident, including sealed interrogation notes and biometric scans never made public. The leak opened doors long locked. A single thread connects all 10 stories. Foreknowledge, impossible accuracy, and in every case, removal. Each encounter suggests that time isn't just being observed, it's being trespassed. But the most disturbing detail? The subjects never ask for help. They only deliver a message and vanish. No theories, no explanations, just fragments, but enough to chart a shape. And the first story is already classified. The Man from Toward. On July 23, 1954, Tokyo's Haneda Airport processed a mid-morning arrival from Europe. Among the disembarking passengers was a middle-aged Caucasian male in a gray business suit, carrying a leather briefcase and valid travel documents. When customs officers reviewed his passport, they paused. The country listed, Taured, did not exist. The man appeared calm. He stated that Taured was a small European nation between France and Spain. He claimed this was his third business trip to Japan this year. When officials showed him a map, he pointed to Andorra and insisted they were mislabeling his homeland. He was escorted to a secure room while Japanese officials contacted Immigration and Foreign Affairs. Meanwhile, the man produced additional documentation: a driver's license from Taured, a company letter of introduction, and a bank book, all bearing consistent identifiers. The stamps matched. The country did not. By 4:20 p.m., the embassy inquiry had returned void. No record of Taured in any diplomatic register. Airport security began cross-referencing his materials. Shockingly, the passport had over a dozen visa stamps, including Japan's own from prior years. UV light confirmed authentic ink density and chronological aging. The man spoke fluent French, Japanese, and Catalan. He referred to Tokyo as Tokyo Province, a linguistic quirk no one could explain. Airport officials grew concerned and called in intelligence observers from Japan's Ministry of International Affairs. At 7:12 p.m., the man was moved to room 2B on the top floor of the terminal, placed under 24-hour surveillance, with guards posted at both exits. One officer signed a log at 11:20 p.m., confirming no movement, subject asleep. The next shift found the room empty. Room 2B had no balcony. The window was sealed. The hallway cameras, recently installed, captured no exit. The door never opened. His briefcase, passport, and identification were gone. Within 36 hours, the guards were reassigned. The security logs were pulled and reviewed at agency headquarters, then destroyed. Room 2B was reclassified as non-operational. The story should have ended there. But a customs official, Hajime Narita, made a handwritten copy of the man's visa entries before the materials vanished. In 1982, Narita gave the document to his grandson, who later submitted it during an oral history project at Keio University. The university library cataloged it, then quietly removed it 2 months later. No reason was given. Narita's family said he was never the same after that shift. He retired 2 years early, refused to discuss the incident, and died in 1967. The only sentence he ever repeated was, "He knew where everything was." The full Tord dossier remained sealed in a Transport Ministry archive until 2024, when a public access petition forced partial release. The documents now reside in a government black site database, with nearly half the pages still redacted. Narita missed his daughter's wedding the week after. He refused to leave the house. 27 years later, across the Atlantic, another impossible traveler would speak, this time on tape. Project Montauk tape. On November 14, 1980, a malfunctioning reel-to-reel recorder was logged inside an abandoned storage cabin on the outskirts of Camp Hero, the decommissioned military installation at Montauk, New York. The cabin had been sealed since 1974, but a survey team found the door partly splintered by coastal storms. Inside, beneath mildew-stained tarps, was a single Tech A6100 deck loaded with a tape already spooled. When technicians played the recording, they heard a child's voice, male, approximately 9 to 11 years old, accent indeterminate. He spoke clearly, calmly, describing a city scene. Tall squares of light, falling like sand. He referenced a skyline collapse triggered by voice command. The phrase appeared nowhere in military lexicons of the time. The tape carried a timestamp, 9/11/80, a date that meant nothing then, but would later cast a long shadow. The boy described buildings that didn't exist yet. Acoustic engineers analyzed the recording across 3 days. There were no edits, no splices, no post-processing artifacts. The tonal development and breath patterns matched real-time speech. A background hum, later identified as a diesel generator, suggested the voice had been recorded inside a subterranean room, not a surface cabin. The boy mentioned glass rain, 2 towers, and plumes that lean east. Forensic linguists noted how his descriptions aligned disturbingly with the geometry of the World Trade Center collapse, an event still 21 years in the future. More unsettling was the terminology. He spoke of a voice-activated override, a system unknown in 1980 but strikingly similar to command-based demolition protocols first outlined in patent applications from 2009 onward. At minute 14, the tape degraded sharply. But before the distortion, the child whispered a line in perfect monotone. "They built the wrong year." His last breath wasn't a child's. Within 48 hours, Naval Intelligence arrived at Camp Hero and seized all physical media. Survey logs were rewritten. The cabin was resealed with a new padlock and removed from the facility map. The engineers who handled the tape were required to sign non-disclosure agreements under penalty of federal charge. One technician, Leonard Ames, refused. He attempted to keep a duplicate of the spectrogram analysis, but security teams raided his home at 3:12 a.m., seizing equipment and notes. His employment record was deleted from the federal contractor registry within the week. Ames's neighbors recall unmarked sedans parked on the street for months afterward. No official explanation was filed. Ames left New York shortly after the raid. According to his daughter, he became deeply withdrawn, insisting that the tape was not a prediction, a memory. He stopped sleeping through the night. He stopped answering the phone. He missed his mother's funeral, claiming, I can't be visible right now. In 2002, 1 year after the real skyline collapsed, Ames mailed a final letter to his daughter. Inside was a single line typed on yellowing paper. The boy wasn't from here. He died 3 months later of heart failure. His autopsy was sealed by request of an unspecified federal liaison. 17 years before the Montauk tape surfaced publicly, another witness, this time in 1897, described technology far beyond his century. The 1897 airship interview. On April 19, 1897, the Dallas Morning News ran a brief, anomalous column buried near the obituaries, titled, "A Conversation with the Airship Pilot." The article claimed that a local farmer near Merkel, Texas, had discovered a landed flying vessel in his field and spoken directly to the man who operated it. The airship, described as shaped like a cigar and wider than a house, appeared suddenly at dusk. Its occupant, reportedly dressed in a tight gray suit, spoke in unaccented English and accepted water. According to the farmer, the man introduced himself simply as Elias. Their conversation lasted under 10 minutes. But the transcript, jotted hastily by the farmer's son, included phrases that had no context in the 19th century. Orbital telemetry, global triangulation, and L5 network latency. None of these phrases existed in 1897. The article would have disappeared into folklore, if not for what came next. In 1964, a retired professor from Rice University found a microfilm version of the article and published a side-by-side lexicon comparison. Of the 23 technical terms quoted by Elias, 17 matched language later used by NASA's satellite division in the 1970s. One term stood out: synchronous altitude correction, not formally coined until 1948 during classified military satellite research. Another phrase was more disturbing: planet Vulcan. Elias claimed it had been removed from common astronomy to stabilize the timeline. At the time, Vulcan was only a fringe hypothesis proposed in the 1800s to explain Mercury's orbit. But Elias seemed to speak of it not as myth, but as a real, known entity. He said Vulcan used to be visible. The original article vanished from the Dallas Morning News archives after 1972. A note in the microfilm register reads, "Copy missing, reindex pending." The professor's follow-up research, presented to a private science consortium, was never published. His surviving notes mention a visitor from a DC agency, possibly Defense Signals Command, who borrowed the original manuscript and never returned it. No correspondence after 1975 survives in his collection. A Freedom of Information Act request in 1999 turned up 0 results under his name or the project title, Elias, L5 Witness. The farmer's son, now elderly, gave a single interview to a Texas radio station in 1981. His voice trembled. "I remember the way Elias looked at the sky," he said, like he missed it. He said his father never worked again, fearing they would return. He died in silence, leaving his field to grow wild. To this day, no verified photo of the 1897 airship exists, but satellite LiDAR scans from 2016 show an unusual soil compression pattern beneath that property, matching a cylinder 30 feet long. And this wasn't the only time evidence vanished. In 2013, security footage of another impossible man was deleted by force. Erased commuter footage. At 8:13 a.m. on July 4, 2013, London's District Line was running 3 minutes late. As a routine eastbound train pulled into Temple Underground Station, platform camera P47 captured an adult male walking against the usual foot traffic. He was clean-shaven, in formal wear, carrying no bag. At 8:14:22, the man paused mid-platform. CCTV footage shows him glancing at the ceiling, then mouthing 2 words, "Not yet." 7 seconds later, an electrical failure in the station's northern service corridor triggered a small but abrupt blast. later blamed on an overloaded circuit panel. The man was never seen again, not in later frames, not in the exit logs. His face does not match any UK citizen, visa holder, or undocumented entry. And what happened next broke Transport for London protocol. The footage was deleted, physically. Initially, the P-47 footage was tagged for technical review due to the timing anomaly. A maintenance engineer, Darren Wicks, extracted a backup file and noted the facial timestamp inconsistencies. The man's presence was recorded at 8:14, but system logs showed no body heat signature from the thermal sensor grid. Wicks filed an internal discrepancy alert. 48 hours later, 3 hard drives, including the primary archive and 2 redundant mirrors, were removed from the TfL central server without authorization. The backup server logs, normally immutable, had been rewritten. Wicks was issued a gag order under Section 26 of the UK Anti-Terrorism Act. The footage has never resurfaced. Security logs show entry. No record of exit. Within days, 2 transport control supervisors were reassigned without formal explanation. Internal emails referencing 8:14 incident were purged from the TfL exchange servers. The event was reclassified as an internal hardware review with no public record. Wicks later claimed a man in a dark coat visited him at home and said, "You didn't see a person. You saw a delay." Wicks moved to Manchester the next week. 3 weeks after the incident, UK Home Office records show a temporary hiring freeze across all TfL digital forensics positions, a move insiders now believe was meant to control narrative access. No casualties were reported from the minor blast. But when questioned in private by a journalist in 2019, Wicks offered one more detail. The man looked disappointed, he said. Looked like something didn't happen that should have. Wicks stopped taking the underground. He sold his car. He never returned to Temple Station. 1 month later, an anonymous package arrived at a BBC office. It contained a still frame from P-47, timestamped 8/14/22. with a sticky note. Check the next pattern. The BBC never aired the image. Nearly 60 years earlier, another man appeared in the middle of a crowd, this time in Times Square. The 1951 Times Square jumper at 11:17 p.m. on June 14, 1951. A man appeared mid-stride in the middle of Times Square. He was struck instantly by a taxi. The driver swore he wasn't there 1 second earlier. Multiple witnesses corroborated the same. The man had materialized from nowhere, upright, walking confidently, as if crossing a familiar street. He wore a dark waistcoat, striped trousers, and a high-collared shirt. A pocket watch was found on his person, stopped at 11:15:49. His shoes bore the stamp of a long-defunct cobbler in Philadelphia. None of the articles looked worn. Police found no identification. At first, they believed it was a homeless man, but his teeth were pristine, his hair combed and pomaded. His coins were from 1876, untouched by time. At Bellevue Morgue, coroners cataloged the man's belongings. A copper token for a saloon no longer in operation. A billfold containing 70, all in mint 19th century currency. Business cards reading, Rudolph Fentz, 57 Fifth Ave. Detectives followed the address. The building was now a bookstore, but records showed it had once been a residence. A landlord's archive revealed that a Rudolph Fentz Sr. had indeed lived there, and that his son, Rudolph Jr., had vanished without a trace in 1876 at age 29. Newspaper microfilm from that year described the younger Fentz leaving for an evening walk and never returning. His body was never found. He looked 29 in 1951. The case remained open for 9 weeks before NYPD quietly closed the file under unidentified pedestrian fatality. The possessions were transferred to storage, then lost in a warehouse flood in 1957. Detective Hubert Reams, who had worked the case, later told a local paper he was discouraged from submitting his findings to the FBI. "They told me I'd done enough," he said. No one wanted an answer. In 1972, Reams attempted to publish a short manuscript titled "The Man Who Didn't Belong to any year. It was rejected by every outlet. His draft remains missing. Reams died in 1983, still convinced he had documented a man from another time. His granddaughter recalls him staring at old city maps for hours, searching for entry points. His wife left him in 1962. "You're here, but your mind isn't," she said. The fence case became urban legend, cited by paranormal authors, but no physical evidence remains. Some historians now suggest it was likely an elaborate hoax or an unpublished fiction mistaken for fact. But no author has ever claimed it. And then, in 1991, halfway across the world, blueprints surfaced for a machine that hasn't been built yet. The unbuilt machine. In October 1991, during the chaotic final months of the Soviet Union, a dying physicist named Dr. Pavel Kirov checked into a remote clinic near Novosibirsk, known for his work in electromagnetic field research during the Cold War. Kirov had withdrawn from public view in the early 80s. On his deathbed, he summoned an engineering assistant, 26-year-old Lena Baranova, and handed her a sealed envelope. Inside were 36 blueprint pages, detailed technical drawings labeled in both Cyrillic and English. The title, Tachyon Interference Array, Genome 3. Kirov warned her only once. "This is not from here, but it is coming." He died the next morning. The machine hadn't been invented yet. Baranova submitted the pages to the Tomsk Institute for Advanced Physics. Experts dismissed them as theoretical fiction until a postdoc noticed a startling match. The array's structural layout was nearly identical to a containment grid, later revealed in CERN's 2015 unpublished prototype, designed to stabilize hypothetical, faster-than-light particles. That CERN document wasn't public in 1991, nor were its internal references to localized temporal distortion fields, a phrase used verbatim in Kirov's notes. Further analysis revealed chemical sensor instructions not achievable with Soviet-era materials. One page referenced signal bleed at 1.44 p drift, a concept not formalized in particle physics until a 2009 white paper. He'd drawn the future with 1990s ink. Weeks later, Baranova's apartment was raided by unknown agents. Neighbors reported 2 vehicles with blacked-out plates, no insignia. She was detained and interrogated for 5 days under charges of academic theft. When released, her notebooks, camera, and the original documents were gone. She attempted to file a complaint through a legal intermediary. But by then, the Soviet Union had collapsed, and jurisdiction vanished with it. The Tomsk Institute quietly destroyed its photocopies. Internal memos marked the drawings as technically infeasible, bordering on destabilizing disinformation. No citation was ever permitted in official Soviet or Russian publications. Baranova left physics altogether in 1993, taking a job as a secondary school math teacher in Kemerovo. She never spoke publicly again. When contacted in 2016 by a Western documentary team, she replied with only one phrase: "They already knew how to break time." She missed her brother's funeral during her 5-day detention. He died thinking she'd vanished too. In 2022, a leaked CERN internal schematic, verified through metadata, mirrored the 1991 design down to bolt position and capacitor yield. CERN declined to comment. A decade later, a call would come from nowhere, carrying warnings from the year 2030. The 2030 phone call. On March 28, 2022, Nairobi-based journalist Caleb Mooley received a voicemail that would alter the course of his reporting and his life. The call came through at 3:47 a.m. from a number reading +130. The digits were irregular, violating mobile protocol across every known provider. The message was 43 seconds long. No music, no clicks, no background noise. Just a voice, male, possibly early 30s, calm, precise, and clipped by static at regular intervals. "You only have until August," it said. "Do not attend the Mombasa summit. The handover goes wrong. Blood on both flags." Mooley hadn't yet confirmed attendance at the East African Development Forum in Mombasa. The summit wasn't even publicly announced until May. The call warned him of a meeting not yet planned. The audio metadata showed no transmission source. Digital forensics traced the file to a temporary cache stored on a cloud server in Frankfurt. But the access logs were blank. When compared to known linguistic databases, the speaker's English showed no identifiable regional markers. More chillingly, the caller named two individuals by full name. One a Malawian delegate not selected until June. The other, a South Sudanese energy advisor, later killed in an unrelated helicopter crash. Muli shared the voicemail with a trusted editor who dismissed it as a prank. But after the crash in August, and after a violent protest erupted during the summit's final day, Muli revisited the message. The phrase, "blood on both flags," matched a viral image from the scene. Protesters waving Kenyan and Ugandan flags soaked in red paint. The image matched a voice recorded 5 months earlier. Muli attempted to publish a column titled, "Voice from the Future." It was blocked by the legal department. He then submitted an anonymized version to a Dutch syndicate. Within 48 hours, the piece was removed from every site hosting it. Without formal retraction, his email was breached twice in September. One message, untraceable, contained a single sentence. "You are not the recipient. You are the transmitter." Muli received no further threats, but his press credentials were revoked without explanation in October. Internal memos from his employer cite conflict of interest concerns. By year's end, Muli left journalism. He sold his apartment and relocated to Kishi, where he now teaches digital literacy at a rural school. In a private note to a colleague, he wrote, "It wasn't a warning, it was an adjustment." He missed his newborn daughter's first year. He didn't tell anyone where he went. One final anomaly. On his phone's call log, the +002030 number appears 5 times. Only one voicemail was ever recorded. In 1999, a child in Greenland would draw the same skyline collapse from memory. The Redshift child. In June 1999, a Danish research team conducting linguistic surveys in eastern Greenland encountered a boy in the remote settlement of Itokkortormite. He was 9 years old, name unknown, believed to be Inuit, but spoke a hybrid dialect never documented in any Arctic linguistic atlas. He appeared abruptly in the community with no relatives, no guardians, no birth records. Locals said he'd wandered in from the ice during a storm and refused to speak for 3 days. Then he asked for black paper and heat chalk. What he drew shook the researchers. A star map. Annotated, labeled in symbols no one recognized. Organized by redshift. One diagram showed Earth's solar system, but with an extraplanetary mass near Mercury's orbit. The label read, "Pre-volcanic line." He mapped the stars by frequency, not light. Astrophysicist Freya Nyholm, part of the team, preserved the drawings and sent them to the University of Copenhagen. Spectrographic analysts confirmed. The redshift arrangement in the boy's map matched several bodies only discovered by infrared survey in 2011, 12 years later. One page depicted vertical rectangles, staggered, narrow, and collapsing inward. Titled, "Voice Collapse Sequence." Freya flagged the phrase as unnerving, but didn't understand it at the time. After 2001, following the real-world destruction of the Twin Towers, she revisited the sketches. The silhouettes matched the New York skyline, exactly. The collapse was drawn in 4 frames, sequentially. Vibration, buckle, tilt, dust. And beneath the final frame, scrawled in uneven block letters, "Trigger error. Not yet." It was the same phrase spoken on the London platform. Within weeks of her follow-up request, Nyholm received a formal cease directive from the Danish Defense Intelligence Service, citing national psychological security risk. Her field access was revoked. The sketches were returned to Greenlandic authorities for cultural review. They've never been seen again. Freya's attempts to publish were blocked by 2 peer reviewers who cited methodological instability, despite no scientific errors. Her funding expired 6 months later, and was not renewed. She lost the maps, but not the memory. The boy? He vanished again. One morning, the schoolhouse was empty. A single handprint in chalk was found on the window, charred around the edges. No footprints in the snow. Freya stopped teaching after 2002. She was diagnosed with sleep paralysis and recurring auditory hallucinations. Always a child's voice whispering. They broke the year. The chalk is archived at the Greenland Museum. Its chemical signature includes synthetic graphite only used in post-2005 laboratory production. The compound didn't exist in 1999. In 1977, behind Vatican walls, one man confessed, "They always arrive 10 years too soon." The loop testimony. In March 1977, Vatican archivist Father Carlo Anselmi was summoned for internal questioning after submitting an unsigned letter to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The letter contained a single line. "The men are arriving early again." Father Anselmi was 61. Quiet, obedient, decades into his role overseeing Index Librorum Prohibitorum records, he was not known for delusions. In a sealed session, transcribed by church officials, he gave a statement that would never be officially released. But in 2009, a partial audio tape surfaced, smuggled from Vatican archives during a document digitization project. On it, Anselmi's voice trembles. He says, "They always arrive 10 years too soon, always alone, always afraid. They don't understand what year they're in." He described people the church never documented. Over the following 40 minutes of the recording, Anselmi details 7 separate visitations between 1922 and 1976. Each involved a person entering a sacred site unannounced, possessing documents from non-existent governments, or citing dates that had not happened yet. One was a woman who demanded to see Pope John XXIII, a pontiff who has never existed. Another wore a jacket labeled Toward Diplomatic Corp, 77 years before the Tokyo airport incident. But the most disturbing detail comes near the end. Anselmi references a chart delivered by one visitor showing gravitational anomalies near Mercury, marked Volcanic Resonance Node, a direct callback to Story 3. And then Anselmi utters a final word, ribosome. At the time, it meant nothing. But in Story 10, that codename will reappear and carry lethal weight. He said the word once, and then refused to repeat it. After the session, Anselmi was relieved of all duties and moved to a remote convent outside Matera. His quarters were never photographed. Visitors were denied. The tape was declared apocryphal by Vatican Press Office. Its authenticity has never been formally acknowledged. But metadata from the leaked copy, verified in 2015, matches Vatican real formats from the 1970s. The tape oxide degrades at a rate consistent with 40-plus years of sealed magnetic storage. The church still denies it was ever recorded. Anselmi died in 1981. His personal effects were destroyed. But in 1983, a page was discovered tucked into an old psalter in the Pontifical Lateran Library. Written in Latin, it read, "They are not visitors, they are corrections." Anselmi's sister said he never remembered her name again after his reassignment, like he was no longer on the same year. The tape now circulates in underground forums, usually titled The Loop Testimony, but most versions end the same way, with static and a whisper beneath it. You were never meant to hear this, but someone did hear it. And 14 years from now, they'll try to erase the source permanently. The Berlin Intercept. In February 2046, a data leak from the Berlin-based Digital Sovereignty Tribunal exposed 1.4 terabytes of internal intelligence traffic, most of it fragmented, code-laden, unreadable. But buried in the dump was a single plain-text memo. It bore the seal of an agency not publicly listed. Directive Oversight Group, DOG, Division 7, Temporal Irregularity Containment. The file name, DT Ribosome 7, Intercept Report, Final, DOG. The memo is short, just 312 words. But every line widens the fracture. Subject Delta T confirmed at civilian level. Frequency misaligned by 14-year loop. Risk of uncontrolled imprint at cultural scale. Engage ribosome 7 protocol. Contain all anomalous data leaks. Terminate civilian recall event. Burn affected timeline nodes. Timestamp, April 9th, 2025. A file from the future, written about our present. It names the year this documentary airs. As a node, digital forensic specialists verified the memo's creation metadata. Compiled on a closed-loop secure node, hardware encoded to a server cluster in Geneva. Its file clock is locked to a GPS-synchronized atomic reference and shows a compile time exactly 14 days ahead of today. The name ribosome 7 was already familiar. Father Anselmi spoke it once in 1977. He called it a correction. And delta T? That term appeared in a suppressed CERN prototype document in 2015, referring to temporal strain during particle destabilization. But here, it wasn't theoretical. It was an asset, a human. Subject delta T is repeating. Proximity interference increasing. Neutralize memory anchors before phase echo. They're not preventing travel. They're stopping memory. Within 24 hours of the leak, 6 independent mirrors of the memo were pulled offline under European data seizure orders. All search results redirected to a 404 page titled Network Integrity Policy Compliance Notice. The Reddit thread cataloging the file vanished mid-comment. The post author's account was suspended. VPN logs from those who accessed the file showed traffic rerouted to relay IPs linked to U.S. Strategic Cyber Command. And then, a silent confirmation. Dog Division 7, though never listed publicly, filed a budget amendment request in the EU Records Archive in 2041 under Trans-Temporal Imprint Control. It had always existed, just not in this year. Digital archivist Petra Keel, who first flagged the file, is now unreachable. Her partner claims she boarded a train to Prague the night of the leak and never arrived. The security footage from Berlin's Central Station cuts out at 22:41. Petra's last message read, "The memo's not a warning. It's a schedule." And then, silence. The file is timestamped April 9th, 2025. That's exactly 14 days from today. If time travel exists, it doesn't look like science fiction. It looks like a stain on the record. A wrong name in a file. A man vanishing from a locked room. A child whispering what hasn't happened yet. Not machines. Memories. Not missions. Corrections. The 10 stories you've seen are fragments. Outliers. But they speak to a system we were never meant to observe. Each anomaly erased quietly. Each witness removed early. Each message delivered just once. If the directive oversight memo is authentic, then someone already knows what this moment becomes. April 9th. 14 days. Until what? One could argue none of this is real. That the Tord man was a myth. That the Vatican tape is coincidence. That the Montauk child's voice was misinterpreted static. And maybe that's true. But the records still changed. The names were still erased. The warnings arrived anyway. So the question remains, if time is being rewritten, whose version are we living in? And if these travelers are adjustments, who was here before they arrived? You aren't just part of time. You may be standing on someone else's correction. Now you choose. Forget what you've heard, or document it before they do. Would you ignore the anomaly, or become one? This video is created for analysis and storytelling. Sources are public. Approach extraordinary claims with healthy skepticism.